Hey everyone, this is Victor, and today we're going to answer a scientific question. This is something I hope to make a series on my channels, but I suppose we'll have to see where it goes and whether it's worth it. But in the meantime, I got to start somewhere, and I think a good place to start is to answer a question that most people can relate to and isn't exceedingly difficult to answer. And this question is, why is the sky blue? Well, actually, as it turns out, maybe that was a bad starting point because the answer isn't as simple as even I thought going into this. Turns out, actually, the sky really isn't even blue. And no, I'm not just being smart and saying it's actually more of a lighter blue than true spectral blue. No, it actually is more of a blue-violet than anything. And now you might be thinking, what the heck are you talking about? Clearly it's blue. When I go outside, I see blue. I don't see violet. What are you on, and can I have some of that? Well, I'm not on anything. I'm just talking about science. And when I'm done explaining, hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from. But first, before I do any of that stuff, I probably should explain really what people came here to have answered, and that's why does the sky have any coloration at all in the first place? Why isn't it just black like outer space or Mercury's sky? Well, we have something they don't, a substantial atmosphere. And that means, unlike those locations where the sun's light really doesn't have much to interact with to deflect it from its straight path away from the sun, in our atmosphere, it can and does interact with air molecules, which can do many things to it. They can reflect it, they can absorb it, or in the case of the sky coloration, they can scatter it, basically spreading it out in all directions relatively equally. Basically spreading it out randomly in any direction, and since there's so many interactions going on, all directions are covered. Now, as this diagram shows, there's more than one type of scattering, but the type that we're most concerned about for the color of the sky is Rayleigh scattering, because this one, unlike the other one listed, is more effective at scattering shorter wavelengths than longer ones, which means, of course, that longer wavelengths of the visible spectrum, such as red, orange, and yellow, don't really get deflected that much and only can be seen if you're looking at the sun, which I wouldn't advise. Blue and violet light do get deflected a lot and in all directions as they enter the atmosphere. That's why the sky looks blue. And it's relatively similar no matter which direction you look at, because no matter which direction you look, there's at least some amount of scattering going on from the air molecules in that vicinity, which send the light in the perfect direction to hit your eyes and register as blue. It also explains why the sky appears more reddish at sunset, because at sunset, the sun is low in the sky and has to travel through a large portion of the Earth's atmosphere relative to when it's higher up. And this means that much more light is scattered out on the way to your eye, which basically leaves only the longer wavelengths like red, orange, and yellow. Of course, this brings up a question in and of itself. Why isn't the sky blue-violet? After all, Rayleigh scattering affects shorter wavelengths of visible light more than longer ones, so violet light should technically be affected as much, if not more, than blue light, yet we don't really see it at all when we look at the sky. Why is this? Well, it has to do with a couple factors. For one thing, the spectrum of the sun that actually reaches our eyes after traveling through the atmosphere and can physically be seen. As this diagram shows, with the visible light band denoted with the rainbow, violet light really doesn't come through nearly as strong as the adjacent blue light. A lot more of it is scattered out on the way, and the sun just doesn't emit as much of it in the first place anyways. Of course, this doesn't explain the whole picture, because if you've looked at a rainbow ever, there's clearly some violet light that's left over, so why don't we see any of it? Well, that comes to the second part of this problem. Our eyes themselves. Our eyes are not flawless. They really can only see a small portion of the entire spectrum. You know, visible light, sure, it seems like a wide spectrum to us, but there's so much more in terms of what radiation can be transferred. Radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, we can't see any of that stuff. And what's more, we don't even see all the visible light equally. So let me explain a little bit about how our eyes work. Our eyes have two different types of photoreceptors that allow us to see. Rods, which don't see color very well, and cones, which do see color but don't work as well at night. We have three different types of cones in our eyes. One is sensitive to red light, one is sensitive to green light, and one is sensitive to blue light, which means that we perceive those colors the most. Anything else that's in between, we don't see as well. And violet has the unfortunate distinction of being located relatively far away from anything except a blue cone. That leaves just blue cones to see violet light. and they don't really do that good of a job of seeing it. And if you've ever looked at a rainbow, there clearly is violet light, but it's probably not the most prominent color because violet light just doesn't show up that well to our eyes. So that's why we don't see the sky as blue-violet. There's not as much violet radiation to be seen in the first place, and that is left simply isn't picked up by our eyes well enough to outshine the blue light that's being scattered. Though, I'm not complaining. The pale blue coloration definitely is pretty cool. Would be nice to see an indigo-ish sky one time, though. But maybe I have to wait for black hole sun. Anyways, hopefully this helped explain a few things. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get to them as best I can.